I've said it before, but pay attention is what they tell us. Pay it. Sorry, let me put the pop filter back on. Poppity pop. Paying attention seems like a modest payment. Or is it? Your attention is perhaps the most precious thing you have, and is the secret to accomplishing anything. If you can hold your attention on creating something or research, there is nothing that will stop you unless you give away your attention. And I think will be tested. All kinds of things will manifest. One minute you are walking in one direction, and the next you're going in the complete opposite. And this is the great distraction that the media provides, diluting one's mental clarity, making you second guess yourself. And I think that's the culture that we've been raised in. That's how this replacement could be pulled off, not by having free-thinking minds, focused minds, but rather subservient ones, willing and ready to be conditioned, told how to think and how to live. This is a city hall, and this is a stock exchange building. And I think we'll start off with this one, since it recently burned. It stood here for hundreds of years, and recently, while being renovated, it was accidentally burnt. All the stone, glass, metal. Where are we? Thank you for being here this week. I love you all. God bless, and welcome. Where are we? This spire is called the Dragon Spire. It actually has dragons here, now burned, and their tails wrap around this spire leading up to this tech. Again, it's survived for hundreds of years. Even in this old depiction, very old, these people managed to not burn this building down. This building is in Copenhagen. A 17th century building is one of the city's oldest. Onlookers gasped as the dragon spire tumbled into the street below. The cultural minister, Mr. Schmidt, said the 400 years of Danish cultural heritage has gone up in flames. Building dates back to 1625. The old stock exchange was being renovated and had been shrouded in scaffolding and protective plastic covering. There we go. Their attempts to renovate lead to destruction. And what is wrong with us? Recently in Paris, not so recent anymore, the Notre Dame Cathedral burnt. Are we such a clumsy people? Or is there more to this? Right from the beginning of our recent recorded history, within 150 years, the same thing is occurring in every city. Every city is either burned or catching fire, and it goes on until this day. Here we can see them ushering art out, really making one question if someone didn't have some advanced notice. It reminds me of the towers in New York City before they turned to powder. Days before the event, they were performing repairs. And if we were to believe all of this, we would really begin to think we were a very clumsy people, very poor stewards of our past. And it's one thing if everything was just accidentally burning and we were upset about it, but oftentimes these structures are demolished, especially in our early history, at a time when it should be difficult to build such structures. And it still is. You can see that Notre Dame still has not been rebuilt. Doubtful that it ever will be. And this really supports the idea that we are not builders of these structures or the original caretakers of them. And essentially that this is not our world. We are squatters. Many of you will have seen my last video. And of course the best part of that video was the end. And right now I want to talk about that a little bit. Now, a lot of things went on with this piece of research, and a lot was revealed after I released the video. This speech in 1852 was given by the president of the church, Heber C. Kimball. It was delivered in the tabernacle. I showed a picture of the tabernacle completely exposed. Today, a great portion of it is underground. housing a giant organ. And the thing is basically like an old world stadium, really. And anyway, some people told me the tabernacle should not be built by 1852. And yet here we have this address, supposedly given in the tabernacle, an official Mormon record called the Journal of Discourses. And we're dealing with a small town, still small today, in the middle of Utah. And the president is addressing his people in the tabernacle. He's telling them in the city of Manti, half of the houses are vacant. There are houses enough empty there to accommodate 50 or 100 families. So they just arrive. This is the beginning. They've sent scouts out, no doubt. And here we're told half of the houses are empty to accommodate 50 or 100 families. You have to remember a Mormon family might consist of at least 10 individuals, very large families. And they're talking about surrounding counties, which will encompass more towns that have similar advantages, in their word. Empty cities. Now, it does say half of the houses are vacant. Half of the houses are vacant. I didn't talk about this in the last video. And who's occupying the other half? People often talk about the Native Americans and how if this case was true, as we can see it is in this official account, why wouldn't the Native Americans take up these homes? Well, here, they're talking about half of the houses being occupied. I don't think they're talking about spiders or mice or anything. No. Someone is living in half of them, and I'm not going to get into it, but much warring and many massacres took place. Not just in Utah, but all throughout the West. What were these wars like? What were the people really like? What were the Native Americans really like before they were painted by authors and eventually Hollywood, such as movies like Dances with Wolves? This gives us an idea of what may have been going on in early America. Let me give you another example. In the South, we have talk of the Cherokee, and the Cherokees lived in antebellum mansions, we are told. This is something that I only discovered while doing this research years ago now. The Cherokee in the South lived in beautiful mansions. Oh, I seem to have missed that one in my mainstream historical indoctrination. It still leaves a lot of questions. Were they just occupying these homes? Or did they actually build them? Or were they built by their civilization before a reset took place, and after the reset they moved back in, never really fully rebuilding? And we have to be realistic. When we look around the entire realm, we see buildings over 200 years old at least. And I have no doubt that people were occupying these cities and were displaced by newcomers. All Native Americans being shuffled around and essentially managed. To this day, I would be outraged if I was Native American. And I'm not, and I'm still outraged. My mom did say we have Native Canadian when she did our family tree, but that's besides the point. A people managed, and don't get me wrong, we're all managed and have been, and oftentimes we're tricked into complying with this management. In the case with Native Americans, they are essentially governed by a Bureau of Indian Affairs. This is a federal agency. They have their federal police, and essentially the federal government is calling all the shots and managing these affairs of the native people. And I don't want to be a hypocrite, because it's the same with us. We have very little control of anything but our own lives, our attention. So here he goes on to say, "We will fill up these mountains, take up the land, and as they used to say in the States, become squatters." So here we go. We have talk of empty cities, at least half empty, and we have talk of inheriting these cities, taking them over, becoming squatters. And this really reminds me of a story in the Bible where the Lord tells the people to move into a city. In biblical times, people go to the city and discover giants, and they say, in the sight of these giants, we were as crickets, tiny compared to these occupants of the city. And here we go. How many more examples like this do we have? My next question for my friend who shared this with me is, how did you find this? And can we find more? I'm very happy to document this. I hope to find the original handwritten text. That's why I thought it was important to hit this topic again. I even hope to make a post on my website. I think it's that important. So let's look at something else. Okay, let's look at some old maps. When we started this research years ago, the old maps were very important. They were screaming that there's more to our history than we've been told. So we started off the video with talk of abandoned cities that would soon be moved into, occupied as squatters. Not just a letter from one person to another, but an important figure addressing his people publicly. And now when we look at old maps, in particular maps of Utah right now, it adds to this story. Again, this is something we could do in every corner of the world. Go back far enough and you will find cities depicted as castles. Now in the case with Manti, the small Mormon town, we're told they would build a super church, temple, cathedral, whatever. They call them temples. And as I always say on this channel, is a cathedral really a cathedral? All these places of worship are after the matter. All of these towns have cathedrals and temples. I believe this is an old Spanish map. Here we can see Lago or Lake of Timpanogos, and we see all of these towns. This appears to be the Great Salt Lake, and down here, what is currently called Utah Lake. This would be Provo up here, Salt Lake. And here we see what is being depicted as primitive native people, bows and arrows. But I think this is just helping to facilitate this big takeover that is about to occur. We have native people here. We have half-empty towns and cities, fully built out, and the people moving in now to occupy all of this, to displace a former people and replace them with their own. Up here we see Indian Yampa Rickus, almost America. Take away this P, and there is debate on how the name America came to be. I'm not going to get into it, but it's very interesting to see it written here. Here again we see the Colorado River, Rio, Colorado. It would feed into the Green, so this must be the Green right here, and the Green merging with the Colorado. And now all of these castles and cities are on the Colorado River. Today you have to charter a raft to explore these sites. And I just wanted to show you a little taste. Of course we've done this before, but I wanted to talk about Columbus. When one starts doing this research, Columbus' story begins to fall apart. We are told Columbus was looking for a route to India, and he accidentally arrives in America and calls these people Indians. Stupid. Now, could these have been descendants of India? I've often talked about India being formerly one of the most advanced parts of this world. People were clearly thriving in India before a reset that turned everything into ruins. And it's no different over here. And when we look at the depictions of Native Americans in the past, we have all kinds of people that don't seem like the Native Americans were taught about. They look much more advanced. Even as I discussed, the Cherokees lived in mansions and dressed very well. And up here you have the Timpanogos Range, and these natives that occupied this area were said to be the Timpanogos people. And here's an old depiction of Utah Indians. Here we go. This is a Utah Indian, Old Elk and his squaw. Here's Old Elk and his squaw. So this doesn't look like a Native American. These look like Hindus from India. She even has the dot on her head. This mustache is very peculiar. And their hair. Nice shirt, nice pants, nice shoes, and gun. Oops. Now these people look very advanced. It looks like some things have been added to make them look a little more primitive. One being these furs. Totally unnecessary. Clearly they're dressed well. Very well. These furs just making them look a little primitive. And this little teepee back here. No way. You're gonna wear this nice collared shirt, this jewelry. You're gonna have a mustache like this. And we're supposed to believe you live in this little teepee back here? Your weapon is nicer than the teepee. So here we have a skewing taking place, showing part truth and part fiction. Now they couldn't show a house back here. Clearly these people lived in something more than this teepee of twigs back here. And what happened with the native people? People say, why don't they tell these stories? Well, we're several generations removed now, and you have to remember that the native people had their children taken from them and brought to boarding schools where they would live and be re-educated. Probably a lot of them resisted and may have ended up in insane asylums and prisons, not too dissimilar. How much do you think that the survivors are going to talk after such a history and brutal experience? I mean, look at us. It's hard enough for us to talk about this subject. We are equally shunned for opposing the mainstream narrative. So I think I'll leave it there, and I'll pop in for some random bonus. This is something I've been working on with David. It's something I wanted. I wanted all the old world sites on a map. This is an app that we're working on, and it's not ready. It's still kind of a mess, but I wanted an old world tool that I could use and all of us in this community. Something that we can interact with, have favorites, and discover more and more clues. So here, for example, we could just show the state capitals. If I click some of these tabs off, and this is the part that requires a lot of tweaking, but this gives you an idea of what I was trying to create. This is David's specialty, something I could never do. He's a computer programmer. If we click here, we see the capital in Salt Lake City, and we can give it a thumbs up. I don't like how it just shows a thumbs down after I do that. How about Nevada? Here's the Nevada state capital, and it links you right to it, right to the wiki, the public information. Now sometimes it's not wiki. Here I can turn all that data on, or I could turn on historic buildings, or just historic markers. It has a search area, and it's really cool and has already proven valuable. Here I'm in Salt Lake City, and I go hiking here with my dog, and I discovered 2 sites here. Really cool. Sandwall and Aqueduct. Just random. I would have never found it. And here we have the historical marker database that we've plugged in. So it's not only pulling up wiki information, it's pulling up a lot of different sources, historical sources. And so here's just some ruins out here that I've walked by and missed right off of the highway. Here you can see a little arch and some stonework and just completely buried. And I think I'm gonna go out here, actually. I'm not sure if it'll make its way into this video. That is my next exploration. What I discovered also while noodling around with this app is like a little city down here. So here's the first clues, and then there's stuff that wasn't shown on here. Let me change the map view. That would be down here. We can click on map view and we can select this one. Now these are free maps. We hope to import more. Some are better than others. And here we can see that site. So here's some ruins. Here is that old aqueduct that goes under the highway. Spits us out over here. And because I know this area well, over here where we see this golf course is where the old Salt Lake prison used to be before they tore it down. A castle, essentially. And down here, it looks like I found an old neighborhood. Here we go. So there are neighborhoods here. You can see the neighborhoods. But then in this park, it looks like there's old foundations and ruins all over. I can't zoom in anymore. But coupled with these official historic sites, I think it's worth coming out here and having a look. And again, something I never would have found. This is something I discovered while just testing this app out. And once again, we can upvote it. Let's see if it saved it. Yes, but I'd like both of them to be up here and maybe just showing green highlighting for the button that you pressed. A work in progress. Now, it's not complete. If there's any interest in this, we'll just continue elaborating and expanding. You can also just view the markers. I think I want to change this to show list, but here we go. So you could have something in particular that you're interested in researching, or you might just find yourself somewhere on accident. We can click show search area here, and let us search over here in San Francisco, for example. Search here, and it's loading, and here we go. So here's everything in this radius. We can zoom down to this area where we know there's ruins. What do we have? Some historical monument, and we see Fort Point, millions of bricks. In my book, we showed how this was here in the earliest photographs of San Francisco. How about here? The Presidio of San Francisco. So this will be around the World's Fair. And all kinds of markers and sites and clues, essentially. I'll continue sharing this. As you can see, I'm very clumsy. There we go. I clicked on historic buildings, and we see a whole bunch here. Down here, we see the Palace of Fine Arts. So now I've clicked on Wikidata and it's showing the Palace of Fine Arts. Let's click on it, and there we go. So if you didn't know anything, this tool would help you discover some of our lost history. So I think that's it for today. Enough rambling from me. I thank you for joining me. I love you all. God bless, and I'll see you soon.